Have you ever felt like you're just wandering through life, stuck in a desert of your own making? It's a feeling many of us can relate to. But what if that wandering had a purpose? Today we're diving into one of history's most epic stories of wandering, the Israelites. 40-year journey through the wilderness. It's a tale packed with miracles, missteps, and profound lessons that still echo today. So, let's set the scene. The Israelites have just been miraculously freed from centuries of slavery in Egypt. They've witnessed incredible things. Plagues, the parting of the Red Sea, a pillar of fire leading them by night. The future looks bright. They are on their way to the Promised Land, a land flowing with milk and honey. The journey from Egypt to Canaan should have taken a few weeks, maybe a month or two at most. Instead, it turned into a 40-year odyssey. Why? What went so wrong? The turning point came at the edge of the Promised Land itself. Moses, their leader, sent 12 spies to scout out the land of Canaan. When they returned, their report was a mixed bag. 10 of the spies came back with a story of fear. They said, yes, the land is amazing, just as God promised, but the people there are giants. We felt like grasshoppers next to them. We can't possibly win. Their words spread like wildfire, and a wave of panic and despair washed over the entire nation. They forgot all the miracles they had just witnessed. They forgot God's power that had delivered them from the mightiest empire on earth. In that moment of fear, they grumbled against Moses and even talked about choosing a new leader to take them back to slavery in Egypt. Their disbelief was a direct rejection of God's promise and His power. Only 2 spies, Joshua and Caleb, had a different perspective. They urged the people to trust God, saying, "The Lord is with us. Do not be afraid of them." But the people wouldn't listen. Because of this widespread lack of faith and outright disobedience, God made a solemn decree that entire generation, the ones who had doubted Him, would not be the ones to enter the Promised Land. Instead, they would wander in the desert for 40 years, 1 year for each of the 40 days the spies had spent in the land, until that unfaithful generation had passed away. It was a harsh judgment, but it was also a period of deep spiritual significance. So, what happened during those 4 decades in the desert? It wasn't just aimless walking. The wilderness became a crucible, a place of intense testing and transformation. It was here, in the barren landscape, that God forged a new nation with a new identity. One of the first major events was at Mount Sinai. This is where Moses went up the mountain and received the 10 Commandments directly from God. This wasn't just a list of rules. It was the foundation of a covenant, a sacred agreement between God and His people. It laid out the blueprint for a just and holy society, fundamentally different from the one they had left behind in Egypt. The people agreed to the terms, and the covenant was sealed, marking a pivotal moment in their journey. But old habits die hard. While Moses was still up on the mountain receiving the law, the people below grew impatient. They went to Aaron, Moses' brother, and demanded a visible God they could worship. In a moment of weakness, Aaron collected their gold jewelry and fashioned a golden calf, a symbol of a popular Egyptian deity. This act of idolatry was a blatant violation of the very first commandments they had just agreed to. When Moses came down and saw their rebellion, his anger was immense. He shattered the stone tablets containing the law, a powerful symbol of their broken covenant. It was a dark moment, but it also showed the necessity of true leadership and sincere faith. Moses had to intercede on behalf of the people, pleading with God for forgiveness. This journey was also a masterclass in dependence. Stripped of all their usual comforts, the Israelites had to rely on God for their most basic needs. Every morning they woke up to find a mysterious, flaky substance on the ground. They called it manna, which essentially means, what is it? It tasted like wafers made with honey, and it was their daily bread for 40 years, but there were rules. They could only gather enough for 1 day at a time. If they tried to hoard it, it would spoil. This daily provision was a constant test of their faith and a reminder to trust God for their daily needs, not their own ability to store things up. When they craved meat, God miraculously sent flocks of quail. When they were thirsty, Moses struck a rock, and water gushed out. The physical desolation of the wilderness forced them to look upward for spiritual and physical nourishment. Throughout these long years, the desert acted as a great purifier. The generation that came out of Egypt had what many call a slave mentality. They were used to being told what to do, and when faced with freedom and responsibility, they often complained and rebelled. The 40 years of wandering were necessary to break that cycle. It was a time for a new generation to be born and raised in the wilderness, a generation that had never known slavery in Egypt. They learned firsthand about relying on God, about obedience, and about community. They grew up with the stories of their parents' failures, but also with the daily reality of God's faithfulness. The wilderness was also where their national identity was truly forged. They weren't just a random collection of former slaves anymore. They were a people bound by a shared history, a common law, and a covenant with God. They built the tabernacle, a portable and intricate sanctuary that was the center of their worship. It was a visible symbol of God's presence dwelling among them, moving with them on their journey. Every detail of its construction was given by divine instruction, a constant reminder that God was at the heart of their community. Finally, After 40 long years, the time of wandering came to an end. The old generation had passed away. A new, more resilient generation stood ready, led by Joshua. The leadership had transitioned from Moses, the lawgiver who led them out of bondage, to Joshua, the military leader who would lead them into the promised land. This new generation had been tested and refined by the hardships of the desert. They had learned the hard lessons of obedience and trust that their parents had failed to grasp. They were no longer a people with a slave mentality. They were a nation prepared for freedom and for the challenges that lay ahead in their new home. The story of the Israelites' 40-year odyssey is so much more than an ancient tale. It's a powerful metaphor for our own spiritual journeys. We all have wilderness periods in our lives, times of uncertainty, trial, and waiting. These times can feel like a punishment, like we're just wandering aimlessly. But as this story shows, the wilderness can also be a place of profound growth, preparation, and transformation. It's where we learn to let go of our own strength and rely completely on divine provision. It's where our faith is tested and refined, and where our character is shaped. The lessons are clear. The consequences of disbelief can be severe, but God's faithfulness endures. He provides for us even in our deserts. And sometimes, the longest, hardest journeys are the very ones that prepare us for the promises He has in store. Thanks so much for watching. If this story resonated with you, let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content that explores these timeless stories. See you in the next video, and God bless.